Welcome, mountain bikers. Thanks for tuning in to Vital MTB's The Inside Line podcast. Got a special guest this week in the form of Chris Cocalis. Chris has a history in mountain biking that is almost unparalleled. He's been in the game for a long time. He started with a BMX background and learned to build his own bikes, eventually turning that into Titus bicycles in the early 90s, which then led him to the creation of pivot cycles, which we all know and love today. Vital's product editor, Brandon Turman, joins me in this interview that we conducted at Sea Otter with Chris, and we have a good time talking about some of the old days as well as getting into current pivot bikes and what the future holds for them. It's a real treat to listen to his insight and to see where he's come from just as a tinkerer who gets an idea and just goes for it. I hope you get inspired, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. This Vital MTB Inside Line podcast is brought to you by Jensen USA. Shop for great deals and get professional advice on your favorite mountain bikes, components, and riding gear. Over 2 million happy cyclists served since 1994. Visit jensenusa.com/The Inside Line podcast and use code INSIDELINE for 10% off qualifying items. Maxxis Tires. Where the rubber meets the dirt, Maxxis makes no compromise tires for any rider, any trail, anytime. Orbea, bicycles from the heart of the Pyrenees, at home on local trails everywhere, including yours. Check them out on YouTube and Facebook to find out when and where you can demo an Orbea. All right, well, this is going to be pretty painless. At least we think so, as we're asking.
As long as you don't hit me with this microphone stand.
Yeah.
Seriously, have you felt it?
It doesn't tip
So
over,
I'll
right?
move it. Get a chiropractic adjustment.
That's awesome.
But yeah, just ask you some questions, get some history, future, past, present. I'll read a formal introduction here and we can get going. But yeah, don't be scared to get close to the mic so we can hear you. And yeah, there we go. You ready? Ready to rip? Got a drink? Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Vital MTB's The Inside Line podcast. I'm Sean Spomer, and I'm here with Vital product editor Brandon Turman.
Hey, guys.
And we're privileged to have the owner of Pivot Cycles, Chris Cocalis, in our presence.
Hi, guys.
Is that how you say it, Cocalis?
That's correct.
All right. So the first question, kind of a doozy, but I got to know if it's true. Is it true that when you signed Bernard Kerr and he came to your headquarters for the first time, that you grabbed him in the belly and said, you got to train harder? Is that true?
It's not exactly true like that, but we became pretty good friends pretty quickly, and teasing Bernard in his early years, I'm just relentless with him, and I don't know, I make jokes about him not knowing how to pedal and just anything, he's so damn fast, and it's just kind of funny to me that I would joke around with him about that stuff.
Hey, I think he picked it up since then. It might have helped, And for the
I make
record,
comments and grab him in the off season. It's like, oh, you and me have been going to the same donut shop, and
hey, those guys should be able to do that every once in a while. They deserve it.
especially when they're with me. I'm bad influence.
Oh.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor? I hear you're a connoisseur.
Movenpick is a Swiss ice cream in
Wow.
in Europe.
Big, like Ben
and,
and Jerry's or Baskin Robbins.
yeah, no,
Movenpick?
there's a brand called Movenpick, and they actually have hotels and restaurants and everything in Europe, and it's they have a Swiss chocolate that's got like shavings of chocolate in the chocolate, and it's but the
Can you get it here in the States at all?
you can't get it here in the States.
Yeah.
You can get it in Taiwan, believe it or not.
Okay.
Really?
You can't get it here in the States.
Be a distributor, right?
Yeah. Close second would be the Haagen-Dazs Belgian chocolate.
Okay.
Really?
That's
Okay. So chocolate,
that's
no
the good,
no
yeah.
crazy flavors that are coming out now, like full of different ingredients. No, just keep it simple. Yeah.
Chocolate vanilla.
There you go. Really, just chocolate or vanilla?
Oh no, mint chocolate chip. How long are we going to talk about ice cream? I'm getting hungry.
Let's get into some bikes.
That's
We
the
gotta
first
race.
6 questions. Let's do some backstory. Just tell us about where you came from, growing up, getting into bikes, that whole thing.
I grew up in Chicago. Started racing. Actually, started like hanging out at the bike shops and stuff when I was probably 9 years old. I was a kid taking out the trash for stickers, and they couldn't
cool.
get rid of me. And
Was it near where you lived?
right near where I lived?
Okay.
Yeah. And then started racing BMX when I was about 13. and raced BMX all through high school, and was on a couple of teams, and ultimately chose to come out to, we're based out of Arizona, and chose to come to Arizona because I used to come out there for the Winter Nationals.
Okay.
And there were so many BMX tracks, you could race every night of the week, and the tracks were lighted. And the last couple of years in Illinois, my senior year in high school, every race I went to was either rained out or rain delayed. So we were racing on mushy tracks where everybody's out there throwing lime down on the tracks to get it to absorb, and you're just like, it's like racing across pillow cushions.
Yeah, totally. You just hope you don't hit the wrong one.
Yeah. So how old were you when you got out to Arizona?
I was 17, 18 after
Okay.
I graduated high school.
Okay.
Came
And so
out to go to Arizona State, and with my personal goal was to also, I turned pro and raced BMX professionally, but that, I was just.
okay, but while you were going to college,
Well, I was
You
going
did
to
it.
college.
Yeah,
cool.
I did it.
That's awesome.
did you win any races?
Locally, we had a good local pro class, and I wound up doing a lot of like kids clinics and stuff, and but really discovered mountain biking. The only mountain bike I had ever seen in Illinois, a kid brought a Schwinn High Sierra out to our dirt jumps, and he let me try it, and I broke it in half on the second jump. It was a brand new bike.
Never doing this
And that was
again.
my entire mountain biking experience. And I came out here and came out to Arizona and started working at a bike shop, and mountain bikes were happening, and everybody was into it, and they were all making fun of the BMX kid, and I went out with them, and
Gave it a
that
go.
was that.
What year was that?
That was 1987.
87. Cool.
Yep.
So what was your first mountain bike?
My first one that I purchased was a Nishiki Pinnacle.
Okay.
And it was their highest end. XT was the highest back then, and but it was basically built with like a Tangay, almost road tube set.
Right.
I think I buckled the frame in like 4 rides.
Dude, you're harsh. What are you doing to wreck everything so
Is that
badly?
BMX background, dude?
Yeah, it
Sending
was. They just weren't built for it, and that was actually one of the thing that got me probably into mountain bike, building mountain bike stuff is everything. Like in the early '80s, we were breaking everything in BMX. Right. Square taper spindles, aluminum crank arms that weren't forged. Everything would just fold, bend, and you make those. You get red line fight cranks, and the pedal spindles are snapping off, and it was like just a reincarnation of exactly the same shit all over again.
Yeah.
And so I had actually, my junior year in high school, the pro length BMX frames hadn't come out yet, and I was I was big enough. I was having problems with the fit on the bike, and I drew up a frame and had a company in California build it for me, and and then I got it, and I don't remember. Maybe I put 2 inches on the top tube length, and not knowing what small differences make big changes.
Yeah, right.
And
You're like, 2 inches sounds good.
yeah, and I couldn't wheelie it out of the gate or anything, but I had a friend who was just monstrous, and he was like 6'4"
Perfect,
and
yeah.
bodybuilder size, and I gave it to him, and it was like his dream come true. And it was my first kind of entrance into geometry.
Some frame building, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wild.
Just sidebar, the mics pick up the table a lot, so yeah, just sorry. Yeah. No, you can where you're sitting's fine, but I just noticed like when you're talking, your hands are in
Yeah.
there, so not to make it awkward or
good.
anything. So
You just did.
yeah. So, hey, so BMX.
Now I'm
huh?
going to be nervous for the whole rest of
You're
the
fine.
way.
Don't worry about it.
What'd you go to school for?
Started out in electrical engineering.
Okay.
Did 3 years of electrical engineering, and then switched to accounting to get out of there, basically. And
Really?
yeah, so I graduated with an accounting degree.
Why'd you want out?
I didn't like electrical engineering.
Yeah.
So after I got all through the core engineering classes and we started getting into the electrical stuff, and I was putting myself through school, was managing 2 bike stores, and started building frames by that time, and it was there's just a lot going on, and switching to the business school seemed the accounting stuff came fairly easy, and I just I enjoyed
Yeah,
it, so I just moved over to that and wrapped it up.
Yeah.
So.
Handy.
Let's get this show on there. Let's build
Yeah.
some bikes.
Were you a tinkerer? I mean, what got you into just building bikes? And if you have a started,
I've always been a tinkerer. I've back in school. I when snowboarding was started, and I first saw the first Burton snowboard, I modified in the wood shop the jigs for making water skis and made my own snowboard. And
that's awesome.
and yeah, I built a set of presses that if they still have a wood shop program there, they probably still use them. But for probably 15, 20 years past when I left, the entry-level woods project was to make skateboard decks, and I made all the molds to make the skateboard decks so that you would shave down the plies and bonding fixtures and then cut it and then make your skate deck pattern, cut it out on the bandsaw and stuff.
That's sick. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just always fixing everybody's bikes and doing that stuff. And over the years, seeing stuff break and everything, and not understanding why all this stuff breaks so easy. And so yeah, it's kind of never being satisfied with where things are at. So.
And so where did that lead you? If you're managing shops, you're racing. I guess racing kind of slowed down, huh? At least the
BMX did, and the mountain biking was taking off, and racing was going on there. And I immediately started mountain bike racing. And my second bike that I purchased was a Fat Chance, and it was a real bike, but still crank spindles mostly on cranks. And I actually drew up I had a design for a bottom bracket and had a machine shop make me tie bottom brackets, and I used to take them.
Cool.
I used to cut out foam and put them in there and buy boxes and spray paint them blue, and had a little company I called Snake Cycles, and I'd take them back to Illinois with them and sell them to some shops there. And
that was bottom brackets.
Tie bottom brackets. Yeah. So I had double row bearings on each side, extended threads on the cups so they hung out almost to the taper.
Okay.
And then a huge spindle in between, and so between the four bearings and the bearings moved outboard, you wouldn't get the spindles twisting or bending, but then you'd like on a Cook Brothers crank arm, the ball on the end, you'd break those off, and it was just like you just move to the next thing.
Yeah. And so then tie for the weight, I assume. Or
this machine shop was doing a lot of tri parts, and so he knew how to do titanium, and I thought that was really cool, and so that's what we did it out of. And then I designed cranks, and then the crank thing was a problem, so I started working on crank design and had another machine shop make those. And we actually I forget, maybe one of the first Interbikes I was at, I showed them there was a company called AC Racing that made fork braces that bolted on, and they liked the crank design. It looked a lot like their fork braces, and so I was selling them cranks, and then they were branding them AC, and then we had spec on Diamondback and everything, and that was like 1989, I think, 1990.
So how many companies were there before Pivot? I mean, you
well, that one was just like the Snake Cycles thing was really backyard home, and then and in 1988 I met the guy. He was actually the original founder of Norba. Lives in Phoenix because Norba used to be under the ABA, the American BMX Bicycle Association, which is BMX organization, and he had brazed up some crazy elevated chainstay bike and brought it into the bike store I was managing, and I rode it around, and it was just horrid handling, and it wasn't straight and stuff. And I said, hey, who brazed this? And I did, and I said, well, if I have some bike designs and stuff, and if you teach me how to braze, I think we could, I could like straighten out this geometry and we could do something. Yeah. And so it was very informal in that I started going over to his house, and in the backyard after work and school, and at night we'd build frames. And there was a shootout in the 1988 mountain bike action that had it was called Bikes of the Future, and it had the two Mantises, the Nishiki Alien. And our bike was in that shootout too.
And what was the brand?
It was called Sun Eagle Bicycle Works. The model was called the Talon, and so that was really the first big deal one. And I mean, we made over the course of the life of that, 15 frames or something, because it took a long time to braze the frames and bend all the tubing, and everything was all hand laid out on paper, and it was just all in the garage. And
was it elevated chainstays? It
was elevated chainstays, and at some point I decided I didn't like the stiffness of elevated chainstays, and Richard Cunningham was doing an aluminum front triangle and a bolt-on steel rear with this Mantis stuff, and I didn't know how to weld aluminum, and I was like, I don't want to do the chainstays elevated anymore. And my business partner, my friend, still wanted to do the elevated chainstays, so I stopped going over there. That was basically.
So now you have the know-how to get it done. Right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, but I basically the roots of Titus started right thereafter, because I continued to work on frames, and then we built the first. I met a titanium welder, and we we built what became the first Titus frames. So.
Okay.
Right.
And what year does
That was 1989.
89.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I incorporated Titus in 1990.
okay. And
So I was actually a junior. That was the other reason. I was a junior year in college.
You're still in college.
Yeah. So that's the other reason I kind of wanted.
3 businesses in and still in college.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
least.
And do you feel like the accounting thing helped you manage the business, or was that not something you were worried about?
Back then, you don't. It's kind of hindsight. You're in your 20s.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of anal with numbers. So it's whether I have an accounting degree or not, it helped because everything just like how much the tubing cost and what I had to sell and just how I had to work it to build the next one. And the first titanium bike I built that was supposed to be for me, I didn't really have enough money to build the next one, but somebody saw it and liked it, and I sold it.
Sure.
So I didn't even own the first one. We built. And so it was.
Do you know if that one's still out and around anywhere?
Somebody in Illinois owns it.
Okay.
And I still get the random email because he was a really strong rider, and then over the years he'd shelve it and buy something else and break it, and it was at the time the goal was I had a group of friends, and we were all really into it, and to the point that it was almost a competition of who could buy what that was different. So one of my friends had a original Ritchie P22 or P21, the brazed one, and then another friend that was like a Bontrager guy, and then I was the Fat Chance guy, and I had like the first Yeti with the 1.5 head tube on it, and so we were. And then another friend had it was like Merlin number 4 or something.
Wow,
he was,
okay.
and so it was interesting to try all those bikes and kind of understand what was going on, what worked, what didn't, and back then they were so radically different in the philosophies, but the ones that really worked, like on a medium frame, the wheelbase was all within like an 1/8 of an inch of each other, so it didn't matter if the chainstays were huge and the top tube was short, or but if they all came in like between 41.5 and 41.6 inches, they were like kind of magic handling bikes for the time, and so that was kind of a driver when I started the first bikes, because I really liked some things about the Yeti, and I liked I had several Fat Chances, but when I got a Yoeti, the chainstay was a little long on climbing, but the overall bike was just pretty magic. So the first Titus bikes had a slightly longer top tube and a slightly shorter chainstay and the exact same wheelbase and the exact same angles.
Okay.
But the Merlin was so flexy, and I found the biggest thickest titanium tubes that we could at the time, and it was like I wanted to build it to ride as stiff or better than my Yoeti, and that's what kind of made it bomb-proof.
Okay.
Because titanium frame that weighs 80% of what a steel frame weighs is still lighter than a steel frame, but
for sure.
it's also slightly stiffer than a steel frame and will last, till Armageddon.
Good deal on it.
Okay. And so, give us the brief overview of Titus history then.
So it was actually just a random guy. He came into the bike store I was managing, and he asked me if I'd ever heard of Merlin. And it was actually just recently that my buddy had gotten the bike and had ridden it, and I said, yeah, and he had read an article on it, and and they had talked about kind of the black magic of welding titanium, and this guy kind of started spouting off that he's a titanium welder. He works at an Allied Signal Aerospace, which they make all the Learjet engines in Phoenix, and that he welds titanium all day long, and that article he read is like total bullshit, and I said, well, I make frames, and he was pretty confident he knew everything about titanium, and it turns out he pretty much did, so then we started building some handlebar stems and some bar stem combos, and then welded a couple steel frames because he was doing the TIG welding, and then we did our first tie frames, and my accounting professor, I was doing an accounting thesis, and he was a cyclist, and we kind of off track here a second. I met John Rader at a bike race, and he's the inventor of the threadless headset, and he had just invented and sold the patent to Diacomp USA, Cane Creek at the time. Within 1 year, everything went from a gooseneck to like 85% of the bikes on the showroom floor having a threadless headset. So he's kind of a big deal. And I met him at a bike race, and he had an idea for a full suspension bike, and I was riding some bikes that we had just welded. So we did some prototype bikes for him and stuff, and I helped him with the suspension design because it was kind of really jacked up. And at the time, got to go way back, but back then Diacomp USA actually made all RockShox product. It was made in Asheville, North Carolina. And so they were making all the dampers and the forks there, and he was able to get a custom little shock made that was just like the RS1, and it had the basketball needle to fill it up and had a little damper adjuster on the back, but it was only about, 4 inches long or something.
Crazy.
They use basketball needles?
Yeah, that's how you heard them up.
Wow, no way.
Yeah, it's like pumping up a basketball.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So he had this design, and we did all the development on it and built the bikes, and then he was shopping it around to GT, and GT wound up buying the LTS design from somebody, and Univiga wound up buying this design called the Shock Block. And I'm coming into my senior year in college. I was actually interviewing with accounting firms, and I get a purchase order for 175 titanium shock blocks from Univiga.
Good job.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I was.
So did your job search end then? Were you like?
It did. My the head of my thesis program was a cyclist, and he was writing a new accounting book, and he said he didn't need the money from the accounting book, so he basically gave me 2 payments of he gave me $30,000 over the year, and then my aerospace welder buddy, his boss at work gave him $15,000 and invested, and we opened a shop up the street from ASU and started Titus, and we were in that we expanded in that complex, but we were in that same complex, just taking on more space for 17 years, and in 2001. I merged with. I had bought him out several years in, and in 2001 I merged with a composites company called Viatech. They used to own a brand called Hizoot, and that was my last 5 years at Titus, and that partnership didn't work quite the way I expected it to. So I had an option at the end of 5 years to either buy them out or be bought out. They didn't like the buyout offer that I made, and so I chose to be bought out and left, and then started Pivot almost exactly 1 year later. So
and is Titus still around anymore? It seems like
the name has eventually, within a few years, it went bankrupt, and the name was and assets were auctioned off, and it's owned by the company that owns On One in the UK, but they don't do anything with it
now.
Yeah, there's no website, and there's some closeout frames on, but it's basically, it was essentially gone about 3 years after.
Was it hard to see it go away like that? Or
the partnership was there was enough problems, and it was my baby, and it was kind of, at the time, it was obviously pretty hard to take something you built over 17 years and leave it. And it wasn't. It was the best option out of a lot of kind of really bad options. So I'm glad it didn't wind up in the hands of somebody who could make it like a powerhouse or do something more with it. So it's probably best where it's at. But we moved
great
on.
History there.
So
So fast forward to now, Pivot Cycles. You guys are crushing it.
Coming up on our 10-year anniversary this September.
Really, it's been that quick. Wow,
yeah. That's crazy.
That is awesome. So fast forward to now. Pivot's crushing it. You guys are creating bikes that not only ride really well, but you guys have pulled off the look too. To the point where I think a lot of people are picking up on the fact that, hey, Pivot's a rad brand I should be considering. But you've been in Phoenix since the beginning, and you guys do a lot of your testing there. How does that impact your bikes? Do you think it's do you do testing at other places as well?
I do testing at other places, and it's interesting when we launched Pivot. we launched with the Mach 4 and the Mach 5, and we had some models at Titus. My best-selling models were the Racer X and the Moto Light, and basically 4 and 5 inch travel bikes. And so the Mach 4, when we launched, was our best seller. And interestingly, the Mach 5 was like a 5 inch travel version of the Mach 4, as far as it wasn't.
Yeah.
It didn't handle appreciably different. It was like an XC bike,
A little
more travel.
Yeah.
And compared to some of the other stuff in the market, it definitely, it was based on, what we knew about working with DW Link versus 4-bar Link at the time, because a lot of my history was with 4-bar Link. I mean, we built bikes for a lot of other companies during the years at Titus, but majority of all our stuff was 4-bar based, and there's just a lot of inherent differences in the DW Link, and it took a couple generations, especially on the longer travel stuff, to sort that out. But also, you having ridden in our area quite a bit, we've got the just super chunky and a lot of power move, climb up steep stair step type stuff,
Relentless.
where you just want that you want that pedaling performance to
be there.
Yeah, and you don't want a big hammock in the middle as you're trying to go up something and your pedals come down and bang. And so a lot of the early stuff was really derived off of that experience, and then and the DW Link anti-squat platform and everything. And as we got into it, and later bikes like the last generation Firebird that had longer travel, definitely settled in more in the Mach 5.7 when it came out. Actually wound up doing a lot more testing up in Santa Cruz, because there was just there's some big differences between the way some geometry on companies like Specialized, certainly Santa Cruz, and the way they settled in the mid-stroke and stuff, and then some of that stuff didn't necessarily work in our neck of the woods very well either. And I knew with DW Link and the wide range of tuning options that we had with wheel travel path and other things, that we should be able to get a bike that maintains that type of pedaling that we needed, but that did some other things well. And coming up here to Santa Cruz, where it's almost the opposite of extreme, like we're super rocky. We're actually not super steep,
right,
but it's fairly big.
Huge
drops and big rocks.
Yeah.
And here it's like super buff, but so steep. And you like here sometimes you learn why like somebody needs a 170 millimeter dropper, and it's even interesting when Fox is testing valving and stuff, because some of the things that they come up with, and a lot of people at Fox ride pivots, and we kind of have to test in both places. And it's amazing, because if you test here, this is one of my good places to like get things tuned in, along with Phoenix, and then sometimes like Western Pennsylvania and the rocks and the roots and stuff, and you get that kind of trifecta, and you can really get a balanced bike if you can hit all those three areas and get the bike working really good in all three spots.
Yeah, very cool. You were in Phoenix for a long time, obviously. Was South Mountain at the time, was that just kind of an open area? You're able to ride your Moto on there and everything?
No, I moved out there in 1987, and it was that last road baseline before you get to South Mountain was actually kind of the end of Phoenix, and everything in back of it was unincorporated. But it did exist, and the park was actually, I think, already starting to become a city park. But actually, right in back of South Mountain, like all that Desert Classic area way in back, was actually the International Harvester Proving Grounds. So there's a helicopter pad back there, and we used to take those plastic tubes that they used to put the golf clubs in a golf bag, and we'd fill them with D-cell batteries and wire them up at each end, because there wasn't any lighting systems yet. And we'd go ride in there at night and go under the fence, and if they were pushing dirt with heavy equipment, the helicopter would lift and do the bullhorn and tell you to get out of there and stuff, and playing Army Man,
Wow.
And so eventually that all got sold off, and the city bought it, and it became the entire South Mountain Park facility. It's the largest city park in the United States. It's 17,000 acres. There's about 300 miles of single track on that mountain. So it doesn't suck to be right there. It's
no doubt. Yeah, it's prime testing grounds, no doubt. I brought that up because you have a bit of a history in the moto world as well, right?
I like Moto.
Yeah, right,
and
exactly.
I get pretty involved in it.
And you have several bikes. You love riding
I've done a project bike, Dirt Bike Magazine, and some testing there and stuff. So, I really enjoy it. My worst injuries have all been via my motocross bike. So.
Yeah, usually they are. Do you think that the things that they're doing in Moto over the years or even currently, do you think there's lessons to be learned there that we can bring into the mountain bike world?
It's interesting now. There's there's always been some crossover, but when I'd ride my motocross bike, I think the biggest lesson was you're on a 12 to 11.8 inch front, 13.2 inch rear suspension travel bike, and you're attaining speeds that you're often riding on single track in the 30, 50 miles an hour, and your sense of how fast things come up changes. But I always rode the motorcycle very differently than the bicycle. But when you look at, just bought one of the newest KTMs, and it just got more compact and shorter, and the bikes just keep getting longer and lower.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting the way I descend on the motorcycle now and the way I descend on the mountain bike and kick them around are eerily identical now. And so those type of things, and a lot of the, when we were early mountain bike suspension, it was kind of just starting to mimic, like trying to cheap out on doing motocross technology and the way valves and shims and everything worked, and trying to put too many plastic parts in to make it bicycle cost effective. But now this stuff, just how much stuff needs to be packaged and to make things pedal efficiently, the bicycle stuff is oftentimes quite a bit more complex than some of the basics of the motocross.
No doubt. It's smaller. It's just inherently more complex, it seems. Yeah.
There's a company called Racetech that actually puts on suspension valving schools, and then people can set up almost like distributorships and set up their own suspension tuning center and get all the access to the website and all the information on valving. And I took all those classes on the motorcycle end and did that on the side for me and my buddies and stuff for a while. And that type of stuff helps, because you see all of that stuff, and then when somebody pulls apart a Fox shock or something and everything's just miniaturized,
what's
but then there's more ports
it.
and more things going on, and you're like, wow, there's actually a lot more tuning options here than what's going on most motocross bikes. And so
do you have any impression or opinion on how well consumers know how to set up their suspension? Or at least
yes, it's complicated.
Okay. How do you address that with people who buy your bikes, just to make sure they're set up well? Because they don't have it set up right, they could think your bike's not that fun.
Yeah, and with a DW Link bike, sag is super important. And if when I used to work in the bike shops in the early days of suspension, we'd pump a little extra air into it to give it a little bit better parking lot, test ride impression. And you do that on a DW Link bike, and it just stands up and doesn't get into its travel, and it feels like a very different bike. And in the early years, we were always talking about the percentage and what the actual sag measurement of the O-ring was, and getting a shop to do that was very difficult. We'd go out on our demo program and set people up and get them set up perfectly, and then big shops of ours would have their own demo fleet, and somebody would come back for give it their last shot, this is okay, I've tested a bunch of bikes, this is the bike I want. Shop's like, oh yeah, take this one out, and then we get an email or a phone call, and they're like, it rode nothing like the one that you guys had. And it's like, well, did they set it up? And well, no. And so the experience is
it's far different.
It's far different than. So we have all our shocks come with a sag indicator on it, so we don't really talk about 25-30% or whatever. It's just set it to the line, and then it comes with a tuning guide. And the way I approach stuff, lower than a Float X2 on where rebound and stuff gets set up is pretty simple process that somebody in 5 minutes can read the document that comes with their bike or on our website and get tuned in. And we spend a lot of time educating the shops, and when our demo team goes around and we're just doing sales rep meetings, it's amazing how much time versus not how to sell a pivot, but just how to get customers set up correctly.
Right.
because that's actually the more important. They're all important, but that's a huge part of the experience, because it doesn't matter about anything else if you just send somebody out on a bike, and good bike, bad bike, if the suspension is just set crap and not anywhere near to their weight, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
So, and we try to set up tuning parameters that it's a little bit harder to screw up, even if you get it off a little bit, and so it's really, as long as that sag is right, and
right
you don't
ballpark.
turn the rebound adjuster all the way in, you're probably going to have a pretty good riding experience.
So there's new devices, there's new technologies coming out. One is SRAM's Quark's ShockWiz. Do you see devices like that and things like that working their way into the mountain bike world, going down that electronic route?
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I'm intrigued by the ShockWiz. I haven't personally tried it, but one of my employees bought it, and we work a lot on the shock tuning, and even getting, I'll send emails out a couple times a year, and I want to know what everybody's weights, what their air pressure and their suspension, and where they're at, and then we basically build, and then also at the demo programs, taking data, taking a look at where we're at, and that's what really develops our shock.
Your recommendations.
Some of our recommendation stuff, and one of my guys bought the ShockWiz, and I just got back from a trip to Asia, but before I left, I was like, it'd be awesome if I picked a few of the fastest, most in-tune people that were working off my suspension tuning guide for the X2 and the 36, and they're basically within the range that's right within one click of what we're calling out on the recommendation.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I'm like, go ride with that thing. And I just want to know if this outside company is throwing data out that's completely, because either I'm off my rocker or they are. And anytime somebody spends that kind of money on a device like that, they've already bought into that this is the authority. So if what you've told them is totally different, then we've got a problem and a discussion with SRAM or whoever where is this being based off of? Yeah. But they came back and they sent me a spreadsheet, and they were everything was within one click of what we were settled at. So it's like, okay, that's cool, and now I need to spend a little bit more time with it, but that would be a great tool to recommend to people if they're techie and they want something like that. Then that's awesome.
Totally. So beyond that, do you think electronics will work their way into, you guys were, I think, pretty involved with the Fox, what was it called, the Live, what's that rear shock called? It was it appeared for a little while, and then it disappeared. He's grinning really big right now, everyone.
Yeah, don't forget about that one.
That's cool to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just a matter of time. It's one of those things that
kind of headed that way.
I think we're at an evolution period from our perspective that a lot of technologies that come out in the bike business, it's really it might be a step forward but 2 steps back. The first disc brakes. It's like, I got disc brakes, but they don't last more than 2 rides, and or the early suspension stuff, and it was a bit of a shit show. And it's kind of at the maturity of the sport, we really can't have shit show technology anymore.
Yeah, it needs to be.
It needs to be dialed, and it needs to be automotive level and right the first time, and that's where I think we really focus a lot. In that, when the customer gets this thing and they're buying a $3,000 to $10,000, $11,000 bike, man, when you look at an $11,000 bike and somebody on the street goes, I could buy a motorcycle for that, this thing better be better than that like a lot better than that motorcycle than you can buy for $11,000, and not have to have weird stuff falling off and have to tape things on and keep things from rattling, and it's just got to be super buttoned down, and that kind of stuff. You can. It's been the development of those type of things. I think we're at a point where the performance of it is magic, but is it repeatable, and is it going to last, and is it going to be like going to be like the Kenmore washing machine or whatever.
There's a lot
Whirlpool
of disasters
keeps going and
there,
going, and it's got to be that way. We're not only, they're not just buying technology because it's technology or because it's the first or it's because of the leading edge, but because when it comes out, it sets a new bar and doesn't like let all the other bars fall apart while it's doing it. It's got to be really dialed, and I think that's some of the stuff that's got to let the wine mature a little bit. You know?
Yeah, no doubt.
What inspires you? Where do you get your ideas from when you're developing something? And it sounds like you seem like you just get your hands dirty and go for it. Like your whole history is like that, but
I'm kind of, I like to be everywhere. I like to go to a lot of factories. I like to see what people are trying, what people are running, and definitely from myself and our company's perspective, I'm proud of the stuff we do, but I also recognize when other people are doing awesome stuff, and sometimes when somebody comes up with an idea, I kind of kick myself like, what? Why did I come up with that? or how can we improve on that? And
Right.
I'm never really satisfied with where we're at, and so somebody asks me, what's your favorite bike? I get that question all the time.
Sure.
And it's a very smart ass answer, but I say the next one, and because
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, that means you're moving in a
by
good
the
direction.
time we finish with a production project, I'm like, I could be one of those guys that like never puts anything out.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not done. It's not done. It's
Yeah.
not done. But at some point you gotta stop and go, yeah, it's pretty done
Produce
for the
something.
time and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
technology and the partnerships we have now and where things are at. Like, this is dialed, and then I'll start working on this other stuff that's going to take a few years to percolate and get done.
Like how far out in the production cycle are you right now? And looking ahead, are you looking at 2020 stuff, 2019? I mean,
Oh yeah, some of that stuff's cooked. I mean, it's in the bag, it's but even further out, sometimes 5 years out. I mean, a bike like the Switchblade was a work in progress and went through like 5 generations of prototypes, and there's other projects that we do that get started, they get shelved. I don't like something about it. Another idea comes out of it, and then some other technology comes along, and we come back to it, and so yeah, we're definitely looking probably 5 years out on stuff when we start talking about projects. And from the time you kind of say, go, we're going to start making prototypes, we're going to do drawings, you really can't get a bike to production in less than 2 years. So you really are.
Even on the tightest
Good ways
timeline.
out.
Yeah.
Wow.
and do component part manufacturers ever try to influence you a certain way that you might not want to go?
Oh yeah.
And how do you handle
Yeah, I
that?
mean, there's been, since day one, since when we launched the first pivot, when Weigel and I were working on what we wanted, had my 4-bar link background, and there were certain things like the fully active braking, the braking torque curve that we were looking for, and some of that was a little bit in opposition to some of the philosophies of DW Link at the time, and we worked through it and found pivot points that we got the path and everything that we wanted out of that bike, but it placed pivots at the time where the front derailleur went. I mean, it was 26-inch wheels, 3x only drivetrain. There was an E-type front derailleur, but there wasn't a direct mount front derailleur, and so we took the E-type off the mount, put the pivots on the inside, put everything around the outside, came up with the press fit bottom bracket, and I was on the Shimano XTR development team at that time, and we designed the press fit 92, and that allowed us to have more space and move everything outboards as far as pivots and welding things on the frame. And so that first bike really had a lot of things that couldn't have been done without partnerships like that. And sometimes there will be other things where things are being done behind closed doors, and it just comes out, and it's all of a sudden a popular thing, and you're like, oh shit,
Because then you need to,
like the whole world's going to change because this company over here did this, and it's not compatible with anything in the space today, and you just hope that doesn't happen when you've just pulled the plug or pulled the trigger on
no doubt.
a 3 to 5 year project, and that's in production that's now going to last 1 year before it's nobody wants it anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
It seems like a struggle.
What along those same lines, I'm kind of curious. Say you make a new bike, say the Switchblade, and you guys have, if say you're working 5 years ahead of time, you have maybe a new Switchblade. How many years do you allow a bike to sell for before you introduce the new model?
It used to be that just the general rule was that you'd get 3 to 4 years, but the last several years, technology and geometries have just changed so quickly that there's been a bit of an arms race that we're certainly part of the guilty parties of pushing it and changing things so rapidly that we obsolete things that don't get the life cycle anymore, and sometimes that's okay. You know, we're big enough now that it's not like we can absorb it, and if we can build a better bike and move on from there, then we do that. And but I think it's pretty exciting what's happened with the geometries and stuff, and the suspension performance and everything in the last few years, and it when you push past like really long stuff or really steep stuff, and some of the compromises, it's like you don't, until you've built like prototypes that go like way past the limit of where we are today, and go, well, will that work? And then you go, well, no, it will work like if you want to build a downhill cross country bike, but it's not really a trail bike at that point. Yeah.
But it's cool that you guys test those limits too.
Yeah. Well, you see things at shows and UK and
good ideas,
and interesting things, and you're like, wow, that guy's really pushing this thing and thinks it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I think that's weird, but you really shouldn't think something's weird. You're like, well, it looks weird based on what I know today. That's just weird. And but if we build it,
try it out,
and go, yeah, it's still weird, but there was a few things here that I learned, and and unless you go there, you don't know it.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you're lined up to go race the e-bike race here at Sea Otter.
Yeah, we got
pretty awesome.
We got like 5 more minutes or so before you have to bone out. So yeah, what do you think about that whole category?
He's trying it.
I'm trying it. It's fun. There, anybody throws a leg over them, it just puts a smile on your face. It's in some ways it's like early years of mountain biking, because there's a wide variety of quality and performance levels of product
and
there,
experimentation,
and so that part of it excites me a lot. And obviously there's trail access concerns and other things that are very real concerns, but at the same time, if people like it and they want it, it's great. I like things with motors. It's kind of fun, and we have an office in Germany. We're doing well in Europe, and it's approaching 50% of the sales in Germany of mountain bikes is e-mountain bikes, and people are just super into it, and so we'll see where it goes. I would never, just like any technology that's in the bicycle business, I dig it all. We'll try it all. It might not be for us. It might be for us. We'll see. But Bosch makes a pretty big deal out of this thing here. They're the sponsor of it, and I don't know. I think I got 5+ emails inviting me to race the e-bike race.
It worked.
And I have never I never even knew there was a race going on here at Sea Otter. I thought it was a trade show that I worked and stood up, talked all day, and so to go out there and do something, it'll be. I think it's the cross bike course that we're racing, because I don't think e-bikes are allowed on the rest of the property.
Got it.
So
that whole access thing. There you go.
Let's since you're talking about why not try everything, we'll close out with this. Will we see Bernard on a 29-inch wheeled downhill bike this year at all?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I'm sure they've tried it though.
It's a good question.
And cue outro music. Doom, doom, doom. Dude, thanks.
Hey, thanks, Chris.
Thank
that
you.
was fun.
Appreciate it.
Have a good time.
Appreciate it.
Good luck in the race too.
Yeah. Kick some butt.
Crazy stuff when I listen to you tell these stories. Every single time I learn something new.
Yeah, what's new that you learned?
I didn't know about the snake bottom brackets.
Oh yeah, that's funny. I still have some of the boxes in my garage.
Thanks for tuning in to Vital MTB's The Inside Line podcast. Episodes drop every other Wednesday. Thanks to Jensen USA Maxxis Tires, and Orbea Bicycles.